Hello class. In this video, we're going to be talking about how to find missing sides and angles using what we know about similar figures. Now there's a couple things you want to remember about similarity before we go into the lesson. First of which is the actual definition that figures are similar when they have the same shape but vary in size depending on their scale factor. Scale factors can make figures bigger or smaller. Most times scale factors can be messy. They're not always nice fractions or nice whole numbers. And lastly, you want to keep an eye out for corresponding sides when you're working on these types of problems. So in our first example, we have two triangles, and we're told that they're similar, but we have a missing side, and we need to find this missing side. Now, before we go into that, you'll also notice that inside of the triangles, we have the angle measures labeled for each of these, but on our smaller triangle, the angles are actually given by variables. So we don't know these angle measures. But if you actually grab this triangle and place it right over the old one, you can see that each of these angles is exactly the same. The only thing that's changed is the size of the figure, but the angles have not changed at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly label each of these angles really quickly so that we can move on and actually find our missing side. So here, C, I see that corresponds with 61 degrees. That's 61. Over here, A corresponds with that 81 degrees, so that's exactly the same. And then lastly, the 38 degrees we have in that corner right over there. So we have all of our angles labeled. Now what we're going to have to do is, we know these figures are similar, and I know I'm missing this length. So I know I'm going to have to multiply 7.75 by something to get this missing side, but I don't know the scale factor yet. So I should probably identify the scale factor. Now, again, I want to remind you guys, you always want to pay attention to corresponding sides. 6.25 is going to correspond with 5.5. And now that we're bringing up angles, we can kind of identify it a little bit easier because I can see over here, this side has the 61 degrees and 81 on that same side. So I know that these correspond with one another. So much like the last video, I want to find what value I multiply 6.25 by in order to get 5.5. And I'm going to be using a little bit of help from my calculator over here. So once I isolate this variable over here by dividing by 6.25, I'm going to plug it into my calculator. 5.5 divided by 6.25. And I'm going to see my scale factor, once I divide 5.5 and 6.25, is 88/100ths, or just 0.88. So now using that, I'm going to multiply my 7.75 by the same scale factor. Since these are similar, I do have to use the same scale factor of 0.88. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to multiply 0.88 times 7.75. Oops. So 0.88 times 7.75. And that's going to give me a length of 6.82 feet. Now, in our next example, you're going to notice that we have two figures that are similar. However, you're going to notice that they're not facing the same direction. So I really want to pay attention to the corresponding sides. So before I do anything, I want to label my corresponding sides. Here I can see this is my longer side, the 15.3, and that corresponds with 4.7. I have my shorter side, which I'm going to label in blue, my 3.2, and that corresponds with this missing side over here. And before I move on, what I'm going to do is I'm going to label all of my angles, and I know since they're exactly the same from one similar figure to the next, I can label them pretty quickly. So if this one's 75 degrees, this one will also be 75, as will this one. And here we'll have two angles of 105. So I've already answered my missing angles. Now, as for our missing side, we need to find the scale factor going this direction this time. So this time we're going from small to big. And the reason we're going this direction is I want to know what I multiply 3.2 by to get my missing side. I don't know what the change is going to be quite yet, but I do know I have to start with 3.2. So I'm going to start over here and go that direction. So I'm going to use my number sentence of 4.7 times something equals 15.3. I divide both sides by 4.7. I'm going to use my calculator to help me out. So 15.3 times, I'm sorry, not times, 153.3 divided by 4.7. And that's going to give me this long, crazy number. But that's still my scale factor, and I still need to use that. So I know that 15.3 divided by 4.7 is about 3.255. Okay. Now, a common mistake a lot of students make is that they'll clear this and they'll use this instead to find their missing side. But when you do that, you're going to run into a couple problems. So first I'm going to show you the correct answer, then I'm going to show you why you're definitely going to want to follow this step. So instead of retyping this, what I'm going to do is I'm going to directly multiply this by 3.2. And that's going to give me a missing side of 10.41. I'm just going to round this a little bit. I'm not going to write all of those digits. I'm just going to round to the hundredths. So 10.4, and if I round it correctly, I'm going to have 0.42. Now, if we imagine for a second that I multiplied 3.2, so we cleared this and I used the scale factor of 3.255 and I multiply that by this corresponding side of 3.2, I end up getting a number that's close to it but not exact. And we want to make sure we get as close as we can as possible. So again, you find your scale factor. Once you have your scale factor, your actual scale factor, the longer one, you're going to multiply that by your corresponding missing side. Now, in this example, we want to definitely identify our corresponding sides first. So I'm going to find my smaller side. Right here, I know x is the smallest side, and that corresponds with 8. Okay. And then I'm going to be noticing that this side, this angle B from D, corresponds with 20.75. And then lastly, the longest side is going to be Y in this figure, and the longest side here is going to be 30.25. So I have my 3 corresponding sides. Now what I'm going to want to do is I want to find the corresponding sides that can give me information. I already know that I'm going to have to go this direction. So I'm going to use a different color. I'm going to use purple for this example. I know that my 8 is going to correspond with my x. My 32.5 is going to correspond with my y. And my 20.75 is going to correspond with this. And what I'm going to do, actually before I do any of that, I want to identify my missing sides, or my missing angles. So over here, I'm going to see my A, which is this top corner point. If I twist that around, I'm going to see that that's A. This is 56 degrees. Right next to it, that would be 136 degrees. If I follow the same trail, I'm going from green to blue. So green to blue down here, that's going to be 86 degrees. And then lastly, my last corner is going to be 82 degrees. Now, what I'm going to do now is I'm going to find my scale factor. You'll notice I have 2 different variables, but I want to find my scale factor because in fact that same scale factor can be used to find both of these variables. So I know I'm going from 20.75 meters times something, which gives me 15.355. So using my calculator, I'm going to actually divide both sides by 20.75. So I divide 15.75 divided by, oops, I'm sorry, 15, my numerator goes on top, so 15.355 divided by 20.75. And that gives me the scale factor of 7,400. So it's not too messy this time. So 15.355 divided by 20.75 gives me a scale factor of 0.74. And I can use the same scale factor to find my y value. So I know I multiply 30.25 times 74 hundredths. So let me fix that. So 74 hundredths. So when I directly multiply that by 30.25, I'm sorry, 32.5, I get that my missing side over here, y, is 24 and 5 hundredths meters. And my tiny side over here, again, I'm going to multiply that by 0.74 since that's my scale factor. So 0.74 times 8 is going to give me 5 and 92 hundredths meters. I hope this video is able to assist you in you being able to say that you can find missing sides using similar figures. Thank you.